What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and Victory Monday. The New York Giants, of course, won on Thursday night. We had Victory Friday. We had Victory Weekend. I spent the whole weekend celebrating the New York Giants beating the Philadelphia Eagles. But here we are on Victory Monday, and the NFC East looks wide open. The Cowboys just lost to the Panthers. The Commanders have had their ups and downs this season. The Eagles, of course, the Giants just beat them, now at 2-4, with a chance to turn their season around under Jackson Dart. This team looks brand new with Jackson Dart at quarterback, new and improved. The energy is back. The vibes are overwhelmingly positive. Jackson Dart is over the face. His face is all over all NFL social media as he's becoming the face of the league. It's an exciting time right now to be a New York Giants fan and to be witnessing Jackson Dart emerge here as their starting quarterback and as their new leader. So it's a lot of fun, but the Giants got to get Jackson Dart a little bit more help. And according to some reports, the Giants have been making some phone calls. They're on the trade block. They're saying, hey, can you give us some wide receiver help? The trade deadline, November 4th. It's less than a month away. It's sneaking up really fast. Could the Giants find some wide receiver help on the trade block over the next month and give them that final spark that they need, that final piece of talent to help Jackson Dart, give him all the pieces in place, the playmakers that he needs, and maybe make a run for the season? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode and go over some wide receivers who could be on the trade block that the Giants could consider targeting throughout the next month as they make these trade calls. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the New York Giants getting active here and looking to trade for a wide receiver?
Doing pretty good, man. Listen, the Giants kind of have an opportunity to turn their season around. The players are inspired. We're hearing all sorts of reports coming out today that Brian Burns held a defensive players only meeting and had a man-to-man conversation with them, said, you guys aren't doing your job. I'm not doing my job. We got to figure out how to do our jobs at the same time at a high level. And then they go out and kick the absolute crap out of the Eagles and allow them to only 17 points. So I think that whatever happened behind the scenes, that whatever happened in that closed door meeting behind with just the defensive players was extremely beneficial to the way they played and how they played and the energy they played with. But they're also rallying around, as you mentioned, Jackson Dart, Cam Scottaboo, just guys that are elevating the floor of this team and giving them a reason to fight. So, with the NFC East at the moment, Zadarius Smith just retired from the Eagles. They need pass rush support. Their secondary is shredded to pieces. They're on the downfall right now. They are on the brink of an actual collapse based on what we've seen from them. They lose to the Broncos, and then they lose to the Giants, and their schedule is just as difficult as ours. So you kind of look at the situation ahead for the Eagles. It doesn't look so pretty for them. Washington, obviously, have Jaden Daniels, great team, but they're regressing back to kind of the mean after last year's surprise. Teams are kind of catching up on how to attack Daniels, how to attack that offense and that defense as well. And the Cowboys are bad. The Cowboys are a bad football team. I mean, offensively, they're tremendous. I mean, without CeeDee Lamb, they're scoring points with George Pickens. They're doing all sorts of stuff. Their defense is one of the worst in the league. Might be the worst defense in football right now. And then you have the Giants, a team that started slow, starting to heat up. You're seeing flashes. You're seeing reasons to be excited. Maybe there's a chance for them to get back in this division. And if there's any semblance of hope, if there's any semblance of upside here, and I think there is plenty of it, Joe Schoen has one job to do. Give Jackson Dart another weapon to help supplement the loss of Malik Nabers. You're not going to replace Malik Nabers. You're not going to replace his attitude, his impact, his playmaking qualities. But you can bring in a player to elevate the floor of this offense. It doesn't have to be a bum. It doesn't have to be a UDFA. It doesn't have to be somebody that won't make an impact on every given weekend. This can be a player that does change the course of your season. This can be a player that does develop chemistry and camaraderie with this team and Jackson Dart and gives you a chance to be even more efficient on offense and not only have to rely on Dart's ability to scramble and make things happen with his legs. As we saw, the more he does that, the more exposed he's going to be to injury. I think he has to do it. He's going to do it, but we need to give him another outlet, another piece that he trusts to get rid of the ball and wait for them to get open and keep his eyes downfield. Right now, we don't have that beyond Wan'Dale Robinson, and I don't necessarily trust Darius Slayton that much either, especially because he's still injured. So, looking at some of these receivers, Anthony, we're going to go through a whole laundry list of options. There's ones that are more realistic than others, and I think it's important to note before we even get started on this process of evaluating who might be available. The Giants currently have less than $1 million in cap space. Okay, so when you're looking at who we can get, the options are going to be a bit thinner because of that. The only options that we do have you can max restructure Brian Burns, and then you have to have extra money to be able to elevate practice squad guys. That's a couple $100K, a game. So like you need to have extra money. Restructuring Brian Burns to the max is going to give you a bit more flexibility, but it's not going to allow you to bring in a big time player. So we're going to, as we go through this list, we'll axe some of them for financial reasons. Others might be more attainable. But Anthony, I'll let you get us started off with the first guy that you want to talk about.
Well, I'll go through the list that Adam Schefter shared on ESPN earlier today, or earlier this weekend, actually. He gave out a handful of names here at the wide receiver position. He also, for what it's worth, did mention some quarterbacks and other positions. Russell Wilson was on that list. I think we'll probably do an episode tomorrow discussing whether or not the New York Giants could trade Russell Wilson. But today, focusing on these wide receivers, these are the names that Adam Schefter listed. Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints, who I think is really interesting and I definitely want to talk about. Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders, who again I think is very interesting and I want to talk about. Allen Lazard of the New York Jets, who I don't want to talk about. Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints, also worth talking about. Tyler Lockett of the Tennessee Titans would probably be worth talking about if Russell Wilson was still starting, but at this point, I don't know if Tyler Lockett makes the most sense for the team. And Brandon Cooks, also of the New Orleans Saints. Now, one major takeaway that I have there, Alex, hilarious to me that the entirety of the New Orleans Saints receiving core is apparently on the trade block.
On sale, baby.
Yeah, all on sale. But apparently, with all those guys on the trade block and the Giants out here looking for wide receiver help, those guys all kind of make sense for the Giants in one way or another. Let's start with Chris Olave, because we've gotten a lot of comments on the Fireside Giants YouTube, on the Instagram as well. There are a lot of fans who think Chris Olave is a perfect match for the New York Giants. And I also listened to the Rich Eisen show earlier this morning, and I heard Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, another insider who's got some great sources and has broken a lot of big news in the past. He listed Chris Olave on his list of wide receivers on the trade block as well, and he suggested that it would probably take around the third-round pick to acquire Chris Olave, which is pretty affordable. However, Alex, reminder, the New York Giants do not have a third-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. They traded it away to move up and acquire Jackson Dart. So they have an uphill battle to climb here to acquire a potential wide receiver in a midseason trade, not having a third-round pick, when that seems to be the going rate for some of these higher-end midseason trade wide receivers. But Chris Olave, Alex, I want to hear your take on him. He's had a lot of injuries in the past. Particularly, he's had several concussions. That's a cause for concern. But when he's healthy, he's a 1,000-yard receiver, and he's a damn good playmaker, and he could give the Giants a WR1 for the rest of 2025 and a top-flight WR2 to pair with Malik Neighbors in 2026 and beyond. So, what's your take on the Giants potentially looking at Chris Olave as an option on the trade block?
Listen, if you take away the concussions for a second and that risk, he is the best option for the Giants. And it's not even remotely close. He is by far, the best option for the Giants. And the main reason for that is because, one, he's had horrible quarterbacks at his disposal, and has still managed to be productive. That's usually the sign of a player that is good but has not reached their potential yet. They need a quarterback to actually maximize that. Jackson Dart could be that guy. The second thing is his cap hit actually aligns perfectly with the Giants. He has a $6.1 million cap hit this year, so the Giants can max restructure Brian Burns, get Chris Olave, or maybe even try to package a player and a pick, maybe a fourth rounder plus something. I don't know what that would look like. Obviously, you have to see what the Saints' needs are, but maybe you find that and offload a little bit of money and do a little salary swap there, so it takes a little bit of the burden off, so you can, at least help yourself in some way. So that makes a lot of sense from a salary cap perspective, but from an upside perspective, Chris Olave is probably one of the better guys that is going to be on sale at the deadline. He has the upside of being a WR1, the downside of being a WR2, which is exactly what the Giants need. And he's already had his club option, fifth-year option picked up for next year as well, with a cap hit of just $15.5 million, which is a nominal price for a player of his talent. But I can't ignore the injuries. I can't ignore the fact that, he has some major risk that comes with him. I'll use this as the counter. Malik Neighbors had like 3 concussions last year and currently has a torn ACL. Injuries are going to happen. It's football. What are you going to do? You can't avoid these things. You just have to hope for the best. Chris Olave, if he has a concussion, if he gets hurt, if that happens to him, it's just football. Anyone could go up and have a similar situation like Damar Hamlin. Who knows? It's football. Anything can happen at any given moment. And I don't think Joe Shane subscribes to the idea of I have to be concerned about that. He's going to go get a good player because he thinks he could be a good fit for this team. Chris Olave immediately probably elevates our offense to a whole nother level.
You're right, and I think you're especially right saying Joe Schoen doesn't seem to be overly concerned with injury history. He seems to just go for talent. But he's been burned a couple times in the past by trading for players with an injury history, namely Darren Waller. Darren Waller had a significant injury history. They went ahead and brought him in via trade. He fizzled out very quickly here with the New York Giants. He's somehow coming out of retirement and finding success with the Miami Dolphins. I don't even want to talk about that. But he struggled with injuries when he was with the Giants, and the Giants traded for him knowing he had an injury history. So maybe there is something to be said about, hey, maybe you should think twice about trading for Chris Olave. But I love Chris Olave's talent. I think he's the perfect WR2 for Malik Neighbors next year. I think he's a good enough WR1 for the rest of the season. Although I do think that there has been some regression as a result of losing all of that time due to injuries in recent years. But he's still a talented player, and I still think that he would make sense. But if the going price, Alex, for Chris Olave is a third-round pick, I'm not getting up to that price tag. For me, it would have to be a player plus a late-round pick for Chris Olave. The risk is just simply too high in terms of his injury history and his long-term potential health. So if it's a fourth-round pick, I also don't know how the Giants are going to swing that. You're going to go into the 2026 draft with a first, a second, no third-round pick, no fourth-round pick, and then you're not picking again from the second until the fifth. That's a really tough sell. So if the Giants could trade away 2027 draft capital, that could be interesting. Or let's say this, Alex, could the package be Darius Slayton plus a fifth-round pick? That could be interesting. Maybe something like that is realistic for the New York Giants. Or could they go to a potential cheaper option in terms of trade value? How about Jakobi Meyers? Jakobi Meyers is in the final year of his contract. He is looking for an extension. He has not had any progress made with the Raiders toward an extension, and that's why he did actually request a trade earlier this year before the start of the season. So Meyers is a player motivated to find a new home, but also wants to go to a new home that wants to pay him. And that might be the barrier there for the New York Giants. Do they really want to pay Jakobi Meyers long term when he is about to turn 31 years old? He's a really good player, though. Don't get me wrong. He's a capable 1,000-yard receiver. He's been a number one receiver for the Raiders on a really bad team with bad quarterback play. But in the right situation, I think he could be a great WR2. Doesn't have to put up 1,000 yards. Could put up 800 yards, but a bunch of touchdowns and be really productive and really capable of doing that for the New York Giants, perhaps. Now, he could play number one receiver for the rest of this year, kind of like we said with Olave, but he pairs very nicely with Malik Neighbors in 2026. However, again, he's looking for a new contract. He's up there in age, so there's definitely some pros and some cons with a potential Jakobi Meyers trade, Alex. What are your thoughts on the Las Vegas Raiders veteran wide receiver?
Jakobi Meyers is a good player, and he's got really good hands. He's just heavily underutilized with the Raiders, and they're trying to go run heavy with Ashton Jetney and whatnot. But Jakobi Meyers, there's a couple of flaws that I do want to discuss that do kind of concern me. The first thing is, he has a $15 million cap hit this year. So you're going to have to take on the rest of that money, and the Giants can't really afford it unless they offload a player and max restructure basically everything that they possibly can. So from a price tag situation, I think...
Well, he wants an extension. So
No. You
would probably trade for him, extend him, and lower this year's cap hit.
I don't think you can do that now, mid-season.
Why can't you extend him mid-season?
No, you can extend it mid-season. You just can't push a current cap figure that's happening in real time into the future.
I think that it would be the same as restructuring his contract. You would extend him and you would restructure this year's contract. You could restructure Jakobi Meyers' contract if you add more years to the deal.
I don't know if the contract already has to be in place before you restructure it, though. Like before the season starts. I don't know the
a couple years ago when the Giants signed, who was it? They actually extended Daniel Jones and then restructured him before he even played on that contract.
But I don't know if there's differences when you're being acquired via trade than you are as it is if you're already on the roster. You know what I mean?
When they acquired Darren Waller, they immediately restructured him as well.
But that contract was already in place. That 3-year deal, $51 million, is already in place.
I don't really see why you wouldn't be able to, but nevertheless,
I have no idea. I'm asking because I'm not sure. Now we're getting into the nitty gritties of contract stuff. Like, if can you be traded, extended, and then also restructured all at the same time? It's possible. I'm just not sure.
I don't see why not. I'm pretty sure that I've seen it happen before. I can't think of a specific example, but I do think it's possible.
Well, it parlays well into my next point anyway. In the point being, The reason I would be cautious with it is because I do think the Giants would prefer to draft a player instead of pay Jakobi Meyers right after paying Darius Slayton. So, like, yeah, you're going to get Jakobi Meyers. You're going to have to give him, like, let's say 3 years, like $40-45 million, probably something in that range. When you could just wait, you have your first and second round picks next year and just draft a receiver at basically no cost, because it's going to be. So that's the flip side of that, which is why I like Olave a lot, by the way, because you're not going to have to extend him. He has 1 year next year, and that's it. And you could move on if you wanted to after that, and you could still draft a receiver to take on his role and have a year to kind of just sit, grow into that role and then assume it. So, like, I do like the Olave experience a little bit more because of that. It also lessens the long-term injury liability. So, like, there is that as well. But, Meyers is a good player. Obviously, like, would I say no to acquiring him? Of course not. Does it come with a whole nother set of bells and whistles? Absolutely. Something you do have to consider. If you extend him, now you have Neighbors, you have Slayton under extension, and you also have Meyers under extension. You have a lot of money tied up in your receiving core. That also means you can't extend Wan'Dale Robinson because you don't have any more money to really spend on the unit. You have to allocate resources elsewhere too. So, you're really going all in with Slayton, Neighbors, and Meyers, and none of those guys are slot receivers. So now you have to find a slot receiver, which you could find in the mid rounds. You could find somebody to play that role, I guess, like a role player and whatnot. But it does change the equation, the balance for the Giants. Olave is the better fit, in my opinion, if I had to choose one of those two guys. But I'm not going to say no to Meyers. He is a good player, and he does elevate the floor of this offense quite significantly.
Yeah, I think Jakobi Meyers is a good player, but I do tend to agree with what you were saying there. I'd rather draft somebody. Chris Olave is a little different. He's younger. There's upside, and, there's ways to circumnavigate his contract. Jakobi Meyers, you're taking on a financial burden no matter what. And he's aging. I'd rather go younger here if we're trading for a wide receiver, because realistically, while I do think this team can become somewhat competitive over the second half of the year, this is still a long-term rebuild. We're looking at trying to maximize the next 4 years, this window for a rookie quarterback in Jackson Dart. It's not all about winning in 2025. And Jakobi Meyers feels like a win-now move, and I'm trying to win now and set the Giants up to win later. So I'm not exactly in on Jakobi Meyers. I'd rather trade somebody. But Alex, there's another player on the Saints that I think is really interesting. Rashid Shaheed. I find him interesting because of the fit. He is what the Giants wish that Jalen Hyatt could be. Jalen Hyatt was drafted by the Giants in the third round of the 2023 draft to be a burner, a guy who plays outside and takes the top off of the defense. He's been anything but that, to be honest. Yes, he made a couple nice catches on Thursday night against the Eagles. We'll give him credit where it's due, but the last 3 years, he hasn't done much of anything. He hasn't been the deep, elite receiving threat. He's really struggled to get on the field. Meanwhile, Rashid Shaheed, former undrafted player, has played 4 seasons now for the New Orleans Saints and has been a top, deep receiving threat every single year. He has elite speed. He finds ways to get open in space and to take the top off of defenses. However, though, he is 27 years old. He is in the final year of his contract. He's only got a $4.4 million cap hit, which means you could reasonably acquire Rashid Shaheed. But going into his year 28 season, you're going to have to give him a contract extension if you want him around long term. But I think that this is a player who does help you for the rest of the 2025 season. He does give you the ability to push the ball downfield and take some of those deep shots and allow Jackson Dart to really turn it loose. So Rashid Shaheed, interesting player. Again, pros and cons with this guy as well. But we were talking about Olave. Tom Pelissero said maybe a third-round pick to acquire Chris Olave. That's a pretty steep price. But for Rashid Shaheed, it's probably cheaper. It's probably around a fifth or a sixth-round pick. And that's a lot more affordable for the Giants and something that I certainly do think they should consider.
I would kick in Jalen Hyatt to go with him. Just give them a sixth-round pick and Jalen Hyatt. You're replacing him on the roster anyway. You're giving the Saints someone that might be able to explore that upside, and you end that era. And it's like a 1-for-1 swap. I mean, they get an extra year of Jalen Hyatt on his rookie contract, but like one of those guys is productive and the other one is not. So when you're looking at Shaheed, yeah, you're right. He's a burner. He's fast. He gets open. He's a big time playmaker. He's not a WR1. He's not even really a WR2. He's more of a high end WR3 type of guy. But at the very least, when you call on him to make those big plays, he makes them more often than not. He's not going to drop the ball in critical situations every single time. Like, he's going to do those things for you if you scheme him open. So, he'll have that one big moment a game. And honestly, if we got one big moment a game from Jalen Hyatt, he'd be worthwhile keeping. But he doesn't give you one big moment a game, so you have to consider moving on. Shaheed is like the bare minimum of upgrades the Giants can possibly justify at the deadline. Like that's the bare minimum. If they walk away with Shaheed, we're like, okay, it's an upgrade, but it's not that much. Anything less than Shaheed is a complete no-go, not even worth exploring those players, in my opinion. Shaheed and better is where we should be living.
Hey guys, just a quick pause on this episode. I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, which is Sleeper. Want to win up to 100 times your money on game day? Sleeper is the #1 sports app with real-time scores, lightning fast news, and daily fantasy picks that take just seconds. Choose more or less on your favorite player's stats, cash in fast, and even chat with friends while you play. Right now on Sleeper, you can get a free $20 entry and no deposit required. Plus, first-time users still also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Download Sleeper today and use promo code FIRESIDE for a 100% deposit match up to $100 and a free $20 entry. That is code FIRESIDE over on Sleeper. And I want to show you guys Sleeper because it's a fun app and I use it every single day. Let's take a look at some picks for tonight's Monday Night Football game. You see the app. It's very easy to use, has a lot of fun interactive pieces on it. And scrolling through here, I want to take a look at this Bills versus Falcons game. Listen, man, I think the Bills are going to have a good game in this one. And I don't think that Michael Penix is going to be able to stand up to the fire of that Buffalo Bills defense. So I'm actually going to go with Michael Penix Jr. under on passing yards. I think that's a bet that I like. And I do think that James Cook, he's going to get into the end zone as he usually does. And I like Josh Allen to get busy on the ground over on his rushing yards. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of cash down there. And as you see, guys, apply promo code. You can put the promo code FIRESIDE right in there on the app when you make your picks to get those bonuses that I mentioned. Just submit your entry. It's as easy as that, and it's super fun. And it makes watching some of these primetime games when the Giants aren't playing a lot more fun. So that's my picks for today, and that is the sponsor of today's episode, Sleeper. Once again, guys, make sure to use the promo code FIRESIDE for those bonuses that I mentioned. Thank you to Sleeper for sponsoring today's episode. Yeah, I agree. So less than Shaheed, not worth exploring. Alan Lazard of the Jets, I'm not interested. Tyler Lockett of the Titans, not interested. Brandon Cooks on the Saints. Again, that whole receiving core on the trade block. I'm good off Brandon Cooks. Now, some other players, though, Alex, these were not on the list from Adam Schefter, but this is a list that you and I compiled through text message today. Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell over on the Colts, a guy that we did like in the pre-draft process a couple of years ago. Same year came out as Malik Neighbors. He hasn't really found his way in that Colts offense, and that Colts offense has a lot of talent in front of A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell has also had some issues over there in terms of some costly penalties, dropping the football before crossing the goal line a couple weeks ago. So there's been some maturity question marks with Adonai Mitchell. That was always the case even when he was at Texas prior to being drafted by the Colts. But he is a very talented and very athletic wide receiver. And he is somebody that has upside that the Giants could potentially try to unlock. And I don't think he would cost a whole lot in a trade to acquire. So, Alex, I know that you particularly do like Adonai Mitchell, so I want to hear your take on the Colts receiver.
Well, look, Mitchell's an interesting case because he's in the second year of a 4-year rookie contract, so he's still very young, and the Colts probably see him as this guy who just needs more refinement. I highly doubt he gets traded because they also have Alec Pierce on an expiring contract. So, Mitchell's kind of a pipe dream, but he's a crispy route runner. He's tough. He breaks tackles. He has decent hands. He makes some boneheaded mistakes, and yeah, that's problematic, but those are coachable things. You know what I mean? Like all of the problems he has, very coachable. He has a lot of stuff you can't teach with his athletic profile and just his route running capabilities and his upside. Like those are like gifts. They're not necessarily coachable. So I do think he comes with a lot of raw skills, just some also raw weaknesses that need to be ironed out and alleviated. But this is a player I doubt the Colts trade, but if they made him available and I was Joe Shane, you love a player like this. He has 3 years, including this year, on his rookie deal. He's extremely affordable, and you give a player to Jackson Dart who has lots of upside they could develop chemistry with over time. And that's a home run trade acquisition, but again, very unlikely that ends up coming to fruition.
Yeah, and really there's two other big names that I want to discuss here, Alex, but I want to go through some of these smaller names, quick hitters first before I kind of end it there as a finale. So I want to talk about Nick Westbrook Aheen. That's a player that you mentioned to me over text that you like. So quick hit there. What are your thoughts on him? Why do you think he is worth exploring?
There are just some players that I think are underutilized At times last year, he had a stretch of games where he was just coming up big over and over and over again, like just a couple weeks in a row where people were starting to talk about him. And, sometimes you flash upside and then that upside gets, kind of squandered. Your team's not playing well. Things are kind of deteriorating in real time. I do think that when you're kind of trying to evaluate players, it's the guys that kind of go under the radar that sometimes are most interesting, because you don't have to overpay for them a lot of times. Like, they're not doing much. And when you're looking at a player like Westbrook Akine, like, you're looking at a team that is in a rut right now. They can't do much. They can't get the ball to their playmakers. Tua's really struggling. The offense is struggling. They're demoralized. Those are the teams you want to target and say, yeah, give me those guys, because we can make them good. Like, we can get them into our culture. They'll buy back in. They'll be motivated, and then we'll see the best. Those are the teams, by the way, Anthony, that, like, why do teams always get the better of us on trades? Because they acquire our miserable, depressed ass players and then inject them into their culture, and then they get better because they're motivated and they want to play and they want to succeed. The Giants now have a culture, seemingly in the process of developing one, that they can steal players from teams that are bad, miserable, depressed, don't want to put any energy in, take those players and make them into quality pieces because they buy back in and they're motivated. So, like, you can steal from those teams now and then be on the winning side of trades. Being on the winning side of trades is very easy when you're the one that's involving somebody else in your success. It's quite easy to hit on those because people are going to elevate their performance. When you're on the other side of that, usually they're going to play down to your performance. So, like, the Giants now may have an opportunity to be on the winning side of some of these deals. So, like, identifying some key pieces that, like, could be cheap to acquire, like Westbrook, could be interesting. I don't know how good he'll be, but it would be cheap to acquire. Maybe in addition to somebody else, could be a piece that the Giants might want to consider.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean by that in terms of his upside. Could be an interesting piece to acquire. So a couple other quick hitters before we get to some big conversations on the last two guys that I want to mention. Next up is DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, this guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer, most likely. Former multi-time first-team All-Pro. DeAndre Hopkins used to be an absolute dog with some of the teams earlier in his career, but now, not exactly the same player. Older, veteran, aging player, now playing on a Baltimore Ravens team that's kind of sinking this year. They've had a lot of injuries. They're not looking like the same Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl contending team that we expected them to be. And DeAndre Hopkins, meanwhile, has barely gotten the ball, but when it's come his way, he's made some really nice catches and still had some pretty nice plays. Do you have any interest, Alex, in DeAndre Hopkins? Affordable contract, veteran guy who could be a leader, a mentor in that locker room at the receiver position, but not necessarily an all that effective player on a down-to-down basis anymore. If it's a really cheap draft pick, I could be interested, but I'm not all that eager to acquire DeAndre Hopkins.
I wouldn't say I'm eager to, but he does bring in a level of competency. I mean, listen, the Ravens are in a bad spot right now. Lamar Jackson's hurt. Like, they're not doing much on offense. They're another team that's kind of squandering expectations, and that demoralizes your whole team. Hopkins has flash competency at times. I think that if you're going to go for upside, you're not going for Hopkins. You're going for straight floor and experience and leadership. But I will say this, Anthony. DeAndre Hopkins will bring something that no other player the Giants acquire will bring, and it's the ability to mentor these young UDFAs, these young guys that are being thrown into the mix. Lil Jordan Humphrey, not that Lil Jordan Humphrey's a younger guy, he's been in the league for a couple of years now, but guys like Bo Collins, even helping Wandale. I just don't look at Darius Slayton and say, this is my captain, this is my leader of the wide receiver room. He doesn't play like that. Hopkins is going to come up big for you in a lot of big situations. He has trustworthy hands. He still gets open, and he's extremely affordable. So he's a 1 year, $5 million, kind of salary this year. I thought the Giants should have signed him just as insurance, but this is an opportunity that I would not hate a Hopkins acquisition because he's going to help everybody around him. But again, he kind of is in the same realm for me as Shaheed. Like, it's the bare minimum. Like, Hopkins is not Olave. He's not one of these bigger names. But if you walk away from the deadline with Hopkins, Shaheed, like those level of guys, like, okay, like, we got better. It's just how much better, we don't necessarily know. So, like, that's kind of the situation. And similar to Shaheed, also on an expiring contract. So, you could, if Hopkins shows anything, you could always extend him for 1 year at an extremely cheap price tag, just as insurance and mentor leadership, that type of vibe. But, obviously that's a discussion for another day. At this point, he's better than what we have in many instances, so I wouldn't be upset about it.
Yeah, I think he could be an interesting acquisition, especially because you have to imagine at this stage in Hopkins' career, he gets traded for a very low price tag, probably a sixth round pick, something conditional even. So Hopkins could be interesting in that regard. Another player that Tom Pelissero of NFL Network mentioned will probably get calls, but maybe won't get traded, is Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. I'm just going to say no from me, dog. I'm not really crazy about the idea of Calvin Ridley. If you look at his contract, Alex, Calvin Ridley has a big deal. His cap hits are $28 million this year, 26 next year, 27 in 2027. I'm not trying to trade for a 32-year-old who's making $28 million per year. So I'm out on Calvin Ridley. He puts up 1,000 yards per season. He's a really good player. Would be a great WR2 for Malik Neighbors, but just not at that price tag for me. I'm not crazy about the idea of Calvin Ridley unless you have any differing opinions.
I mean, when the Titans signed Ridley, they went on this wild spending spree and were just handing out like record-breaking contracts left and right. So I don't really think that he's worth that money. I think he's a decent player, he's a good player, but he's not a great player. Obviously their wide receiver situation, or rather their quarterback with Cam Ward is still a rookie, and that offense is really in the mud right now. But he's a player that could definitely use a change of scenery. I'd say that for sure. But the Giants don't have the money to pay a guy like that. Like that's a situation where I'd be like, I'd rather just wait. I'd rather just get nobody than get Calvin Ridley and then draft a receiver next year. Like that's kind of how against it I am. It's too much money for a player that is too volatile and he's getting older, and I don't trust that value is going to be maximized, if you could say. If it was a big time threat in their prime and like they were producing, it's a different story. He's not doing those things right now.
I do agree with you. I'm out on Calvin Ridley. One more smaller name guy, Alex, before we get to the last two big hitters that I wanted to discuss and save for last. Iosivas of the Cincinnati Bengals. Another player that we liked in the pre-draft process a couple years ago. Former track star, a lot of speed to this kid, played at Stanford. Has been buried on the Cincinnati Bengals depth chart. They have a lot of talent at wide receiver. Of course, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, but they've had a lot of other guys in there at that WR3 spot. Iosivas makes some plays for them sometimes, though. He's definitely talented, but underutilized. What do you feel, or how do you feel about the Giants potentially sending a late round pick and taking a flyer on a kid who's still young and has some upside?
Oh, I'll tell you one thing. He's coming off probably the worst game of his career against Green Bay. He dropped 3 passes on 4 targets. So like from just that perspective, yeah, like there's concerns. But I'll tell you this right now, Anthony, like it's an anomaly, and you might be able to capitalize on that. He hadn't dropped a pass yet this season before then. Not to say he had that many targets, because he hasn't been targeted that much, only 16 targets and 8 receptions for 121 yards. But again, another bare minimum. He's 25, track star guy, like you mentioned. We actually talked about him a couple of years ago during the draft process, and a player that we did actually like, but he's buried behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And last year had 59 targets for 36 receptions and 479 yards and 6 touchdowns. So he does have some explosive capabilities to his game. He dropped 4 passes last year and then 2 as a rookie. So, he does have some suspect hands at times. But, this is a guy that is a freak athlete, really good downfield speed, and he's tough. Like I've seen him make some pretty good contested catches before, and he actually plays a lot in the slot too, which is interesting because 63% of his snaps come in the slot this year compared to 36% out wide. Last year was 52.4. He's actually been transitioning year by year into more of a slot role, which is super interesting, and I think that wouldn't be a bad insurance policy to have behind Wan'Dale, and you could use him a bit flexibly. You could have him as doing a couple different things. So just a good insurance policy. He's not going to cost you a whole bunch. He's a 6th round pick. He's kind of buried in that depth chart. He doesn't really do much. Had just a bad game recently. Like you might be able to buy low on him and then just stash him and see if anything comes of it. Again, minimum stuff. He's not going to be a changer for your offense. He's not going to be a big time playmaker, but he's just more decent depth that you have to round out a unit that does need it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I see the upside there. He's made some tough plays. He's inconsistent, sure, but he's also buried, and I think with more opportunities, potentially, Yoshi could be a decent player. So, last 2 names that I want to talk about here, Alex, these big heavy hitters, again, that I mentioned. Number 1 being Jaylen Waddle. So, I want to mention him. He's not a very likely trade candidate. He's not a guy that I think that the Giants are necessarily going to acquire. I don't even think that the Dolphins are going to trade Jaylen Waddle, to be completely honest with you, but I still think he's worth discussing because his name has at least been floated out there in some respects. The Miami Dolphins are really bad. Tua Tagovailoa is terrible. I was actually at that Dolphins-Chargers game yesterday. I watched Tua throw those 3 terrible interceptions, and I watched the Chargers win a really exciting game. But Jaylen Waddle, I also watched him just get open all the time, especially in that first half. He is very talented. He is a good receiver, and he's a player that could be maximized in a better situation with a good young quarterback like Jackson Dart. I think he would have a blast throwing the ball to Jaylen Waddle, and all the speed that Jaylen Waddle possesses. He would be really exciting, but is he likely to be traded by the Dolphins? Probably not. Tom Pelissero listed him when he was on the Rich Eisen show saying, hey, teams are probably going to call for Jaylen Waddle. The Dolphins probably won't trade him, but they're a really bad team, so you never know. And Jaylen Waddle at this point, Alex, probably is in that same price tag range as Chris Olave, where maybe it's a third round pick, maybe it's a second. I don't think it's a second, but maybe a third, fourth round pick and then something extra. That could be reasonable, but he is on a big deal, but he is a really good, talented player. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Waddle? Do you think that's a guy that the Giants should pursue?
I mean, Jaylen Waddle's a game changer. Like, Jaylen Waddle can win you football games. He's going to elevate your floor. He's a WR1 on most teams. He's a WR2 on teams that have Justin Jeffersons and Neighbors and stuff like that. But, you know, this is a guy who was one of the most unbelievable prospects I've ever seen coming out of Bama. Like, this dude was an unbelievable player, and he still is. The fact that he's had, of his 4 seasons, like 3 of them over 1,000 yards is insane. Like, considering how his quarterback has performed and how many injuries he's seen happen, you know, over the years to people around him. Like, this is a player who is the perfect example of a guy that you change his scenery and he could be in the conversation as one of the best receivers in football. But because he's on the Miami Dolphins, Anthony, he gets forgotten. You know, Jaylen Waddle is one of those forgotten stars. And I think people underrate just how good he actually is. If the Giants got a player like that, he's worth a third round pick. You know, Jaylen Waddle's worth a third round pick. But if you think about it just from a perspective of this, you're getting a proven player that could be a WR1, and your you know, superstar Malik Neighbors is only in the second year of his rookie contract. He has 3 more years left of his deal before he ever gets paid. And the Giants can always push that cap hit into the second year and then the future ones too. So you really have 4 years of cost-efficient Malik Neighbors before he has big cap hits. And that assumes he continues to play at this level and bounce back from ACL injury. So there's a lot of stuff that has to happen for Neighbors to even achieve that goal at the end. But best case scenario, you have 4 years of pretty cost control play from Neighbors. And, you know, with Jaylen Waddle's contract, it's pretty hefty. You know, he has this year it's only $8 million cap hit, so the Giants can afford him right now under their books if they restructure Brian Burns. He has an $11.6 million hit next year, which is not bad at all. Then it balloons to $33.8 million in 2027, and then it's $37.2 in 2028. But with the cap exploding the way it is, that's not going to be that big of a deal. And they have an out after that 2027 season anyway at $9.7 million if they wanted to go in that direction and maybe he gets injured or like he's regressing significantly. You have that insurance policy. If you have to give up a third round pick for Jaylen Waddle, Anthony, and that's the going rate for him, you pull that trigger tomorrow. You know, you pull that trigger tomorrow because you get a monster for Jackson Dart, and then him and Neighbors together, holy crap. Like, that's a tremendous amount of talent.
Okay, so let me say a couple things, though, because I agree with you. I mean, listen, an offense of Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, and Jaylen Waddle.
Scattaboo.
That would be fun to watch. Yeah, and Cam Scattaboo in the backfield. I was talking about passes, but even Cam Scattaboo. I mean, that is an exciting offense right there that you run into 2026 with, and you say, we are coming to take down the NFC East. We are going to try our best to win that division if you have Jaylen Waddle paired with Malik Neighbors and Jackson Dart throwing the ball. But, Alex, you mentioned that third-round pick. You send that for Jaylen Waddle. The Giants don't have a third-round pick. Obviously, we're okay with that because they traded for Jackson Dart with that third-round pick, but I want to ask you this, and I think this is a tough sell for Giants fans, even for me. But the Giants have been willing to trade second-round picks before they acquired Brian Burns. Would you go up to a second, or is that too rich for you?
Yeah, I would. I would give a second for Jaylen Waddle and like a 5th or a 4th round back because second-round picks are not guaranteed. No draft pick is guaranteed. None of them, right? You want to know what is guaranteed? Jaylen Waddle. So you are getting Jaylen Waddle and look, as a Giants fan, and guys, I think that we should come to the agreement now that as Giants fans, we get obsessed with the draft, and then we end up like the last 2 drafts have been good, but we've seen how many times those picks don't end up becoming anything. You know what I mean? They become nothing. So we traded a second-round pick for Brian Burns. You guys going to go back and redo that? Because I don't. You know what I mean? You trade a second-round pick for Jaylen Waddle, and you have Neighbors. You have an unbelievable offense, and you got it. You traded a second-round pick that could have been anything, and you still have that first-round pick, which you could use on the offensive line. You could draft the interior lineman. You could draft secondary piece, a corner. You could do anything with that. Now you have the ability to say wherever that pick goes, we're happy with what happens. And you get Jaylen Waddle and Neighbors on your team. Every good football team has two great receivers. Every great football team. You need to have two big-time receivers. The Giants have the ability to do that with a player like this. I would give a second-round pick. Maybe people call me crazy, but if the Giants make that second-round pick and it becomes nothing, I won't really look like the crazy one at the end of the day.
Listen, I'm going to add some perspective to this, which is kind of an analogy that I saw on Twitter recently. The best GMs, listen, drafting, it's like shooting three-pointers. The best three-pointers in the NBA, or three-point shooters in the NBA, they hit at a 40% clip, right? The best GMs at drafting also hit at about a 40% clip. So if you're one of the best in the NFL drafting, you're likely missing on more picks than you're hitting on anyway. So when you're trading away a second round pick, yeah, it's tough because we've seen a lot of great talents come out of the second round, and obviously you want the 4 years of cost control. And when you're a young team trying to rebuild, you want to build through the draft. Of course, that's true. But when you can find a player on a value deal like Brian Burns for a second, you got to take that because that's a piece that you build around for the future. That's a piece that helps you now and then. And so does Jaylen Waddle. So I think I'm with you, Alex. If you could trade a second for Waddle and a fourth or a fifth, man, I'd probably do that too. Just the idea of Dart, Waddle, Scadaboo, Neighbors, all together in the same offense sounds so exciting for 2026. Yeah. So I absolutely love that idea. But
I wanna throw a little bit more context in that as well, because I think that there is a lot to kind of justify this move with. And I'll say this: the next 2 years the next year's cap hit's nominal. You're gonna get this year's cap hit, which is light. And you're getting a player that's instantly going to elevate your offense in a big, big way. But most importantly, Anthony, let me ask you this. And if you guys are interested in responding to this in the YouTube comment section, please go ahead and do so. The Giants just traded a second-round pick, or rather, they didn't have a second-round pick in this year's draft because they used it to get Brian Burns. Rather, wait, why don't they have a second round? Am I bugging? Why don't they have a second-round pick again?
They have a second-round pick in 2026. They don't have a third-round pick.
2025. I'm talking about 2025. They didn't have a second-round pick. I forget
because
why.
They traded up from the second round to get Jackson Dart in the first.
To get Jackson Dart. Right, okay, so that's a perfect example. They're not afraid to use those second-round picks to maximize an opportunity. But let me list off some names to you and tell you, would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or Tyler Nubin?
Bro, come on. Jaylen Waddle.
Would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or John Michael Schmitz?
Come on, you know the answer.
Would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or Wan'Dale Robinson? Would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or Azeez Ojulari? Would you rather have Jaylen Waddle or, I can list first-round picks too if you want, because they missed on a lot of those in the past. But, the Giants have an opportunity here to get, if they were willing and able to get him for a second-round pick, you do that deal because the history for second-round picks is murky at best. And you get an immediate impact piece. Immediate. And you have a guy who's been, I'd say, underutilized with Miami and under-respected and, has been underwhelming because of their situation. He needs a change of scenery. Going from Miami to the bright lights of New York with this type of energy right now, oh, man, that's what you want. If Joe Shane, strike while the iron is hot right now. They have a couple weeks, I get that, but I'd actually be trying to make deals sooner than that. The iron is hot, the energy is high. You bring in a playmaker like that for this team right now, you're gonna reap the rewards because they're gonna fall right into the mix there and be like, oh, this is different. Jaylen Waddle, this is different than Miami. This is a whole different world. And they're going to buy into that energy, and they're going to elevate their performance in their game, and the Giants will benefit, and everybody will benefit. I'm absolutely okay giving a second-round pick for Jaylen Waddle because I know we're obsessed with draft picks. That's what we've been trained to do because of how bad we've been in the past. But now we have a chance to say, let's turn those draft picks into star playmakers that other teams don't want because they can't pay them, or they're pissed off, or they're upset. Giants now have the ability to do that. And this year and next year's Jaylen Waddle's cap hits are so freaking low. And the Giants, because of Jackson Dart's rookie contract, have so much freaking money in 2027 that they can easily fit Jaylen Waddle's contract in. And they could extend them, like you said, and even restructure further. So, there's opportunities here. This is a no-brainer. I would give up a second-round pick today to get Jaylen Waddle. I wouldn't even hesitate.
Screw it, man. I'm with you. Listen, at first I was hesitant. I'm like, I don't know if I want to give up major draft capital for a wide receiver. The Giants are 2-4, and I think that's important to remind ourselves. They're not a winning football team right now. They beat the Eagles, but they're still a 2-4 team. But I just think the long-term prospects of adding Jaylen Waddle, he's still young. He's so talented. He's so good. So
people don't get it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I'd be interested in it if that's possible. But again, preface this. Tom Pelissero listed Jaylen Waddle, but said he doesn't think the Dolphins would likely trade Jaylen Waddle. Right. But hey, if the Giants came calling with a second-round pick, this really bad Dolphins team that's trying to blow it up, maybe they'd be enticed. Who knows? It's totally possible. Final name that I want to mention, Alex, before we get out of here, and this is one that I'm really into. I know a lot of Giants fans aren't. I feel like he's a controversial figure at this point. It's Jerry Jeudy. The Giants actually did attempt to trade for Jerry Jeudy at some point last season. They considered doing it. He ended up getting traded from the Broncos to the Browns for only a 4th and a 6th round pick. Very affordable. Now a year later, he's back on the trade block. He could be traded for an even cheaper price tag than he was last year. It was a 4th and a 6th last year. It could be just a 5th round pick to acquire Jerry Jeudy this season. Now, Jerry Jeudy, the pros and the cons, let me go over them. Pros, he's a separator. He can get open. He is a good wide receiver. He is much better at getting open and completing the play than Darius Slayton or anybody else on the Giants roster currently. But the cons, well, he's had some drops. He's had a couple injuries too. He hasn't necessarily missed seasons, but he's missed some games. He's been a little bit banged up, but he's definitely had some drops. And that's the big issue with Jerry Jeudy. But for me, Alex, if you look at his contract, it's not all that bad. $8 million cap hit this year, $10 million next year, $13 after that. He's under contract for a long time. Yes, he's starting to get up there in age. He's 26 now, though. I don't even think that's all that old. I think he's still pretty young. I think he's a great route runner. He can play in the slide. He can play outside. He can be a decent wide receiver one for you for the rest of this season. He's being completely underutilized with the Browns right now. I can't believe what they're doing to him in his career. But he could be a good receiver this year for the Giants. And next year, pairing Jerry Jeudy in the slot or even on the outside with Malik Neighbors absolutely tells me that's an offense that can get open, can score some points through the air. I think that's really good. And the last point that I'll make before I hand it off to you, Alex, last season, Jerry Jeudy had a tear of games where he looked like the best receiver in football for like 3 weeks. Who was throwing him the ball? Jameis Winston was throwing him the ball. They are friends. They have a great connection. And I know Jameis Winston won't be throwing him the ball here with the New York Giants. But just to bring Jerry Jeudy back with Jameis Winston, that's a vibe check. That's an increase in vibes. That's positivity. And Jameis Winston is currently mentoring Jackson Dart. He could say, hey, listen, Jeudy likes these throws here. He likes these routes on this down and distance in this situation, and he is going to make the play for you. Trust him. So you're automatically going to have a built-in layer of trust between Jackson Dart and Jerry Jeudy that's built together by Jameis Winston. Plus, he's an upgrade over anything the Giants have currently. He's affordable, and he's affordable in terms of his contract, and he's affordable in terms of his price tag via trade. I like the idea of Jerry Jeudy. A lot of fans don't, but I think he makes a lot of sense. Plus, and the last point, sorry, Alex, I know you want to talk about him.
No, go
Brian
ahead.
Dable, he has a history with Jerry Jeudy. He coached him at Alabama, and he loves Jerry Jeudy. That's why the Giants tried to trade for him last year. So there's a lot to say about the connections between the Giants and Jerry Jeudy, and I think he would be a big upgrade over what they had now, and I think he'd be a great WR2 to pair with Malik Neighbors in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jeudy is a very good football player. He has drop problems, but he's also going to make a ton of plays for you. He is extremely shifty in the open field. He's a big-time playmaker. He gets paid like a big-time playmaker. What was the deal again? It was 3 years, $83 million or something like that?
I'll give you the exact specifications. It was a
3 years,
three-year, $52.5 million deal.
Okay.
He has a $8 million cap hit this year, $10 million next year, $13 million that year, following to 2027. The reason why it's low is because they have a lot of void years attached to the end of the contract. $11 million void year in 2028, 2029, it's like $8 million. So there's a lot of void years at the end. However, if you're the New York Giants, you're probably going to move those void years. You're going to extend him. You're going to find a way to get that money off your books sooner. So I think it could work.
Yeah, it could definitely work. The Browns are dumb as hell, man. Just looking at this contract, the only teams that do stuff like this should be contending teams. The Browns are so far from being a contending team. I do not understand why on earth they would do that. But listen, looking at Jeudy as a player himself, very, very good player. This is a guy that has WR1 potential and upside, and he currently has Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback. So I would be remiss to say that, the Giants have a better quarterback and one that will feed him and one that will be developing chemistry. And I think one of the more underrated factors behind getting a player that is under contract already is that Jackson Dart and that player, whether it's like an Olave or whether it's a Waddle or a Jeudy, he'll have chemistry with them going into next year, which will allow him and Neighbors a little bit of extra cushion to catch up. It'll allow Neighbors to kind of like not have to be a superstar again coming off an ACL tear. Like he can really like ease back into his role and develop chemistry with Dart without the Giants offense struggling because of that. You know what I mean? They'll already have that chemistry built with Dart plus whoever they acquire. And that'll be really beneficial for Neighbors as he like kind of gets back into the fold. So it gives him a lot more of a cushion for that landing. And I think that's a kind of an underrated factor behind this. That's why it is attractive to me to acquire a player that is under contract with that WR1 upside. You know, Jakobi Meyers, I remember talking about him earlier. I don't label him a WR1. I think he's a WR2. And because of that, like it is a bit of a different kind of upside, you know, like we're talking about Olave, we're talking about Waddle, we're talking about Jeudy. These are WR1 upside type players. These are like star players. I wouldn't label Jakobi Meyers a star player. I label him a good player, but not a great one. I'd even say Olave is like fringe on that, but I'd say Jeudy and Waddle are like, those guys are WR1s. So, you know, that's kind of where I perceive it, but you know, I would not be opposed to the Giants bringing in a big time player if they could find a team willing to trade one. We'll just see it. We'll just have to wait and see who's available, and we're going to find out in the next month.
Agreed, man. And like I said, just as a reminder for Giants fans, in case maybe you are apprehensive to the idea of Jerry Jeudy, last year he was traded for a 4th and a 6th. He could be traded for the exact same package. The Giants would give up 2 day 3 picks potentially, maybe even just 1 day 3 pick. Maybe it's just a 5th round pick for Jeudy. That's a price tag that I am willing to buy in on a receiver who last year had 1,200 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. This year, he's down to 240 yards through 6 games. He's got 48 targets and only 20 receptions. That's a quarterback issue. When you are catching less than 50% of your targets, it's not necessarily the receiver's fault. Usually, it's the quarterback not being able to target the receiver efficiently or accurately. I like Jeudy. He's always had upside to be unlocked, and he's never had the right opportunity to get it unlocked. I think with Brian Dable, knowing him, liking him, with Jackson Dart, and like you said, Alex, you got a rookie quarterback. Now's the time to acquire players on contracts. That's when you want to do it. Acquire those players on those contracts because your rookie quarterback is on a rookie contract himself. That's called maximizing your window. So I like Jerry Jeudy. I like a lot of these names that we mentioned, though. Chris Olave is interesting. Jaylen Waddle is interesting. Jerry Jeudy is interesting. And even some of those lower guys, Rashid, Shaheed is interesting as well. But guys, I want to hear from you down below in the comment section. Who do you find interesting? Who do you think the Giants should trade for? Or do you think the Giants shouldn't make a trade at all? I also want to hear those thoughts down below in the comment section. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Football Giants.
Perfect.